In the grand history of monarchies, few kings have faced a journey as turbulent as King Charles III. After a lifetime of waiting in the shadows, he finally ascended the throne at the age of 73. But fate can be cruel. Just when he should have been basking in the glory of his long-awaited coronation, whispers began to spread that the king's health was quietly slipping away. Recent appearances tell a story no royal statement could hide. His face, once calm and composed, now appears gaunt. His steps have grown slower, his shoulders heavy, his gaze distant. The sparkle once seen during his first months as monarch has dimmed into exhaustion. The palace insists the king is merely resting. Yet the silence from Buckingham only fuels deeper concern. The British people watch with anxious hearts, while the press, unusually quiet, seems to be keeping something from the public eye. Behind those majestic palace walls, what truth lies hidden? Is it simply fatigue or something far more serious? And if the unthinkable should happen, who will carry the crown forward? The loyal heir, Prince William, stands ready. But is he truly worthy to lead the nation through what could be its most fragile chapter yet? What do you think? Does Prince William deserve to be the next King of England? If you believe he does, press 1. If not, press 2. Because the story you're about to hear may forever change how we see the House of Windsor. It will take you behind the silence, behind the smiles, to uncover the truth that Buckingham Palace never intended to be heard. In recent days, concern over King Charles's health has reached a level that can no longer be ignored. The palace's calm reassurances no longer match what the public sees with their own eyes. The king has reportedly been admitted to hospital several times in just a few weeks, each visit shrouded in secrecy. Official statements mention only routine checkups. Yet those who have seen him up close say otherwise. He looks pale, exhausted, and far thinner than before. His once firm voice now trembles, and his movements are noticeably slower. Doctors, according to sources close to the palace, have been forced to change his medication after his body began showing signs of resistance. Treatments that once kept him stable no longer seem to have the same effect. The king has been struggling with chronic fatigue, frequent and severe headaches, and a sudden loss of appetite that has caused him to lose weight at an alarming rate. Insiders describe him as physically present, but mentally distant, often staring blankly into space during private meetings. Over the past month, several royal engagements have been canceled with little explanation. At events where his presence was confirmed, the king would arrive unexpectedly, spend only a few brief minutes with guests, and then quietly withdraw. Cameras caught him rubbing his temples, as if in pain, before being gently guided away by aides. Each rare appearance only deepens public anxiety. British media, usually relentless in covering royal affairs, have adopted an uncharacteristic silence. Headlines have grown cautious, the tone subdued. Some veteran journalists suggest this is not mere respect, but restraint, perhaps even instruction from within the palace itself. Something is wrong, one royal correspondent confessed. We're all being told to wait for official updates that never seem to come. Outside Buckingham Palace, well-wishers have started leaving flowers and letters of support. Many of them remember how King Charles, after decades in waiting, finally took the crown and promised to modernize the monarchy. Now they fear he may not have the strength to see that promise fulfilled. Even those within royal circles have begun whispering of contingency plans. What might happen if the king is forced to step back from his duties? Such conversations, once unthinkable, are becoming more frequent behind closed doors. The air inside the palace is heavy with uncertainty. Servants speak in hushed tones. Advisors come and go with somber faces. Those closest to the king describe a man trying to hide his suffering from the world. Late at night, he is said to wander the halls of Clarence House, unable to sleep, clutching old letters and photographs of his mother, the late queen. He misses her wisdom, one insider revealed. He keeps saying she would know what to do. For a monarch who spent his entire life waiting for the crown, fate now seems cruelly impatient. The body that once carried the weight of patience and duty is betraying him just when he finally achieved his destiny. And yet, behind all this sadness lies another story, one of shifting loyalties, quiet fears, and growing tension among those who stand closest to the throne. Because as the king's health continues to decline, those around him begin to act in very different ways. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere has grown unbearably heavy. Days blur into nights as King Charles remains under constant medical supervision. By his side, Prince William has quietly abandoned all royal duties and personal plans. He rarely leaves the king's quarters, choosing instead to stay within reach, often sleeping in an adjoining room so he can be there the moment his father needs him. Those close to the royal household say William now moves through the palace like a man carrying two burdens. At once, the grief of a son and the weight of a crown he never wanted so soon. Every doctor's update makes his heart sink a little deeper. He knows the moment he's dreaded for years may come sooner than expected. In silence, he has begun preparing for the inevitable, the day he must step forward as king. Yet behind his calm, princely composure lies fear, doubt, and an unspoken wish that he could have just a little more time, not as heir, but simply as a son. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Harry wrestles with a different kind of pain from his home in California. He calls often, sometimes late at night, just to hear his father's voice. The conversations are brief but emotional. "How are you feeling, Pa?" he asks softly, though both know the answer. The king tries to sound strong, reassuring his youngest that everything will be fine. But Harry hears the fatigue in every word, the pauses between breaths, and yet, despite the calls, he hasn't returned. The distance between him and the rest of the family still feels insurmountable, a wound left open for too long. Some say pride keeps him away. Others believe it's fear, fear of facing the institution he once renounced, and the brother whose trust he may never regain. For King Charles, this is the cruelest part of all, to feel loved by both sons, yet separated from them by the very crown that defines his life. Those who have seen him in private describe moments of quiet despair. At times, he asked to be left alone, gazing at old photographs of William and Harry as young boys, their smiles untouched by duty or resentment. He keeps a small silver frame on his bedside table, a picture taken years ago at Balmoral. "We were happy then," he reportedly said to a close aide. Doctors speak in measured tones, urging rest and optimism. But the king seems to understand more than they admit. He's aware that his time is slipping faster than anyone wants to believe. Each sunset over Buckingham feels heavier, the walls echoing with memories of laughter that has long since faded. William and Harry's attempts to reconnect, one through presence, the other through words, are tender but fragile. The king, trapped between them, carries both hope and regret. Hope that they might reconcile before it's too late. Regret that his reign, so long awaited, has brought more sorrow than peace. And yet, even as the king's body weakens, the machinery of the monarchy grinds on. Decisions are being made, plans drawn quietly in the background. Everyone senses change is coming, but no one dares speak it aloud. Because while the king's sons struggle to find their way back to him, someone else within the palace has begun to move differently, quietly, deliberately, and with purpose. In another wing of Buckingham Palace, far from the sick room and the whispered prayers, Queen Camilla has started making decisions of her own, actions that, if discovered, could change everything. As King Charles's health visibly declined, Queen Camilla began to act strangely. Staff who had served the royals for decades whispered that something about her demeanor had changed. Her eyes no longer showed the warmth of a devoted consort. They reflected calculation, quiet urgency, as if she were preparing for something monumental, and perhaps irreversible. In recent weeks, several royal aides noticed Camilla spending long hours in her private study. The door was always locked, her tone sharp when disturbed. Late at night, the faint glow of her lamp could still be seen through the heavy curtains. What was she doing, they wondered. when everyone else in the palace had gone to sleep? The answer began to surface when a trusted footman overheard fragments of a tense phone call. Camilla's voice, low and urgent, speaking to someone she called Jonathan. That name, as it turned out, belonged to the financial advisor of her son, Tom Parker Bowles. Rumors spread swiftly through Buckingham's staff corridors. Some claimed that Camilla had quietly begun transferring portions of her wealth to offshore accounts. Others swore they saw confidential documents being delivered to her quarters, sealed and hand-carried by men in suits who bypassed the usual palace protocol. There were even whispers that a property in Switzerland, under Tom's company name, had recently changed ownership. And all of this, coincidentally or not, began just as the king's condition took a serious turn. William was among the first to sense something was wrong. He had never fully trusted his stepmother, and now every unexplained movement or hushed conversation only deepened his unease. When palace accountants reported unusual activity in several shared funds tied to the royal household, William knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. In private, he asked his aunt, Princess Anne, to help him keep watch over Camilla's actions. Anne, with her quiet discipline and sense of duty, agreed without hesitation. Camilla, of course, was not unaware of the suspicions surrounding her. She had lived long enough within the monarchy to understand how whispers could destroy a reputation faster than any truth. Yet, instead of stopping, she seemed to grow even more determined. Her phone calls became more frequent, her tone colder. "We must finalize everything soon," she was overheard saying. "Things are moving faster than expected." But what exactly was she finalizing? The media had begun to notice her increasing absences from royal events. Invitations were declined last minute. Her public smiles, once confident, now looked forced. Some tabloids speculated that she was simply overwhelmed by the king's deteriorating health. Others, however, believed there was something much darker unfolding, that Camilla was securing her future, and her son's, in case the inevitable happened sooner than anyone dared to admit. Insiders described a chilling moment one afternoon, when Camilla was seen standing alone in the king's study, staring at a portrait of Charles painted decades ago. Her face was unreadable, part sorrow, part calculation. When a maid entered the room, Camilla quietly turned and said, "He was always too trusting." Then, without another word, she walked away. Behind the palace walls, the tension grew unbearable. William's mistrust, Anne's silent vigilance, and Camilla's secretive maneuvers created a fragile triangle of suspicion and fear. Every decision, every meeting, every whisper carried weight. What if Camilla truly was preparing for a life without the king? One where her influence would survive, perhaps even grow. The royal household, always so careful to appear united before the public, was beginning to fracture from within. Yet amid all this uncertainty, one thing became clear. Camilla's actions were not those of a woman caught off guard by tragedy. They were the deliberate moves of someone anticipating change. Someone who understood that power in the monarchy doesn't simply fade away. It shifts. And as the king's strength waned with each passing day, so too did the illusion of stability around him. As King Charles's health continued to decline, the once radiant life inside Buckingham Palace dimmed into a heavy silence. It was then that Princess Anne, the king's only sister, known for her unwavering discipline, quietly took control. While others hesitated, she stepped forward without hesitation, becoming the steady pillar holding the monarchy together amid the growing storm. In recent weeks, Anne has appeared more frequently in public, whether it was visiting hospitals, attending charity events, or representing the crown at national ceremonies. Her presence was constant and reassuring. She spoke little, but every gesture carried the quiet authority of someone born to serve. While the king's absence was explained away as rest and recovery, it was Anne who maintained the illusion of normalcy, ensuring that the machinery of the monarchy continued to move, smoothly, dutifully, and without cracks showing. Behind closed doors, however, the atmosphere was tense. Anne worked with relentless energy, meeting with advisors, reviewing reports, and giving direct orders that even senior courtiers dared not question. Her primary command was clear. Under no circumstances should the full extent of the king's illness reach the public. She knew the monarchy's stability depended on secrecy. If the truth leaked, that the king's condition was worsening rapidly, the media frenzy could shake not only the palace but the entire nation. Yet amid her endless duties, Anne began to notice something else. Camilla's behavior had changed. The queen consort, once always visible at the king's side, now spent more time secluded in her private quarters. Rumors trickled through the staff corridors, strange late-night phone calls, unregistered visitors, and sudden meetings with financial advisors. Anne's instincts told her something was wrong. She began to monitor Camilla's movements discreetly, speaking with trusted aides and reviewing the financial documents that crossed her desk. What she discovered left her cold, a trail of unusual transactions, all linked to accounts associated with Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles. It was subtle at first, transfers that seemed like routine family affairs. But as Anne dug deeper, the pattern grew suspicious. Money was moving quietly, out of the country, into private holdings that could not easily be traced. For Anne, who valued transparency and loyalty above all else, this was an unforgivable betrayal. The tension between the two women began to surface in quiet, clipped exchanges. During one meeting, Anne reportedly challenged Camilla about her recent absences, only to receive a polished but evasive response. From that day on, the polite smiles between them and at public events concealed an undercurrent of mistrust and rivalry. For Anne, it wasn't just about money. It was about the monarchy itself, the legacy her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had spent a lifetime protecting. She feared that Camilla, blinded by personal motives, was undermining that legacy at the worst possible time. Still, Anne kept her composure. She continued to appear calm and in control, projecting strength to the outside world. But behind the palace gates, she quietly gathered evidence and prepared herself for whatever confrontation might come next. And that confrontation was not far away. Because soon after Anne's investigation began, Camilla made a shocking move, one so bold and unexpected that it sent ripples through every corner of the royal household. 3 separate financial transfers, each larger than the last, all directed to her son. When the total sum was finally calculated, even the most loyal royal aides were stunned. The quiet power struggle inside Buckingham Palace had just reached a dangerous new height, and Princess Anne was no longer standing in the shadows. The tension that had been simmering inside Buckingham Palace finally reached its breaking point. For weeks, whispers had filled the corridors, hushed voices, sideways glances, and the faint echo of suspicion that no one dared to speak aloud. But one evening, as Princess Anne reviewed a confidential financial report, everything became clear. There it was, undeniable proof. 3 separate transactions, all routed through a joint offshore account, each under the authorization of Queen Camilla. The total amount? An astonishing figure that left even the royal financial advisors speechless. Anne's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Every transfer was traced to Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son. This was no misunderstanding. It was deliberate, calculated, and worst of all, it had been carried out while the king was bedridden, fighting for his health. Anne wasted no time. She called Prince William to her private office inside the palace, her voice steady but cold. "You need to see this," she said, sliding the documents across the desk. William read in silence, his face drained of color. The numbers on the page didn't just represent money, they represented betrayal. "This can't be real," he whispered. But Anne's expression told him everything he needed to know. They immediately alerted the royal advisors. Within hours, the news reached the king. Charles sat quietly as they presented the evidence, his eyes fixed on the papers before him. The room was so still you could hear the faint ticking of the antique clock behind him. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, too calm. "Bring her to me." Moments later, Camilla entered the room. She looked pale but composed, her eyes darting between Charles, Anne, and William. No one spoke. For a long, heavy moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the palace air vents. Then Charles broke the silence. Oh, his voice was low, tired, but sharp enough to pierce through the stillness. Why would you do this, when I'm lying in a hospital bed fighting for my life? Camilla took a deep breath, her hands clasped together. Because I was scared, she said finally. Scared that tomorrow you might not have the strength to protect what belongs to my children. I did what any mother would do. Her words hung in the air, fragile, trembling, almost human. But to Charles, they struck like a blade. Protect, he repeated, his tone tightening. You call it protection. I call it betrayal. Anne turned away, her jaw clenched in anger. William stood frozen, torn between fury and disbelief. For him, Camilla's explanation was nothing more than an excuse, one that could destroy everything their father had built. Charles rose slowly from his chair, his body frail but his eyes burning with quiet rage. All my life, I've tried to rebuild what was broken, he said, his voice breaking. I fought for you when no one had believed in us. I gave you a crown, Camilla, and this is how you repay me? Tears welled up in her eyes, but the king did not soften. You think I don't know fear? He continued. I fear every day that my time is running out. But even so, I would never steal from the institution I swore to protect. For the first time, Camilla was speechless. The room seemed to close in around her. Anne stood silently by the window, arms crossed, her face expressionless, but her heart heavy with sorrow. William's eyes met his father's, a silent exchange of shared grief. The king's breathing grew shallow. The doctors had warned him to avoid stress, but the damage was already done. The emotional weight of the revelation was more than his weakened heart could bear. He turned away, whispering, Leave me. Camilla hesitated, then bowed her head and slowly walked out. The heavy oak door closed behind her with a hollow thud that echoed through the hall, a sound that felt final. That night, the palace was quieter than ever. The corridors were empty, the lights dimmed, and even the guards outside seemed to sense that something irreversible had occurred. In his private chamber, Charles sat alone, staring at the portrait of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, in a faint voice, he murmured, I've failed them all. Down the hall, Anne met with William again. Both looked exhausted, their faces etched with worry. He won't recover from this easily, Anne said softly. Not physically, not emotionally. William nodded, his gaze distant. Neither will she, he replied, because deep down, both knew that the confrontation had changed everything, not just between Charles and Camilla, but within the monarchy itself. Trust had been broken, and no amount of royal decorum could fix it. It was early morning when the decision was made. Inside Buckingham Palace, the corridors were silent, the air heavy with something unspeakable, as if the walls themselves understood that history was about to change. King Charles sat alone at his desk, his trembling hand hovering over a single sheet of paper. The royal crest glimmered faintly at the top, and beneath it, the words that would end a marriage once called destined. It was the official document of separation. For a long time, he didn't move. The fountain pen rested in his palm, but his thoughts were elsewhere, in memories of laughter, in whispers of promises made under the weight of stolen love. Yet now, all that remained was silence. Finally, with a deep, tired breath, he signed his name. Camilla was informed minutes later. No shouting, no tears, just a quiet exchange of words between two people who had once defied the world for each other, now too exhausted to fight. Her car was waiting at the side entrance of the palace. The queen consort, no longer in title, nor in spirit, stepped into the cold morning air, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She clutched a small handbag. Inside it, a folded letter Charles had written years ago, one she could not bring herself to leave behind. The black car door closed softly, and without a word, it drove her away from Buckingham Palace. That afternoon, the palace issued a carefully worded statement. Her Majesty Queen Camilla will be taking a temporary leave from royal duties to focus on her health and personal well-being. But the public wasn't fooled. The press, restrained but restless, began to circle. Temporary leave, headlines questioned, or quiet separation. News anchors spoke in hushed tones, analysts speculated endlessly, and the British people, once divided over her presence, were now united in one emotion: uncertainty. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was equally tense. William was devastated. He had seen this coming, yet it still hit him like a storm. The sight of his father, frail, silent, eyes fixed on the rain outside the window, broke something inside him. For William, this wasn't just a royal scandal. It was his family, once again, unraveling before his eyes. Across the ocean, Harry heard the news through his aides before the official statement reached him. He didn't say much, just a quiet sigh and a long silence. Those around him didn't know what hurt more, the distance he had chosen, or the helplessness he now felt. He wanted to call, but words failed him. And then there was Anne, the ever-composed, ever-loyal sister. She had stood by her brother through triumph and humiliation, through duty and despair. Yet when she entered his private study that evening, she saw something she wasn't prepared for. Charles sat in the old armchair that once belonged to their mother, Queen Elizabeth II. The soft light from the fireplace flickered across his face, pale, lined, tired. On the desk lay an untouched cup of tea and a framed photograph of the Queen, watching silently over him. Anne didn't speak. She simply walked closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. His eyes met hers, eyes that once carried the certainty of a monarch, now filled only with the fragility of a man who had lost too much. "I did what I had to," he said softly. "But it feels like I've lost everything." Again, Anne's hand tightened slightly. "You haven't lost everything, Charles. You still have your crown, and your children." He looked away, shaking his head. "The crown feels heavier than ever, and my children, they carry wounds I gave them." The room fell silent again. Outside, the rain had turned into a soft drizzle, tapping gently against the window, a rhythm that seemed to echo the king's weary heartbeat. Anne stayed a while longer, then quietly left him to his solitude. As the door closed behind her, Charles turned toward the portrait of his late mother. "Did you ever feel lonely, too?" he whispered. The fire crackled, but no answer came, only the faint sound of the rain and the echo of a love story that had finally burned out. And so, on that night, for the first time since his coronation, the King of England slept alone, not just as a monarch, but as a man stripped of the love he once believed would save him. Perhaps no monarch in the history of Britain has ever endured such loneliness and sorrow. The king who once stood at the heart of the nation now sits in silence, surrounded by golden walls that no longer bring comfort. His health fades with each passing day. The love he once believed eternal has turned to ashes, and even his sons now walk on separate paths. What remains is not glory or triumph, but a cold and heavy crown that weighs upon a weary soul. Outside the palace gates, people still pray for their king, hoping for strength and healing. Yet within those ancient walls, a chilling stillness lingers. The corridors once filled with laughter of the Queen and the warmth of family now echo only with the sound of his footsteps. Is this the final dawn of King Charles III, or merely the calm before a greater storm that fate is preparing to unleash upon the House of Windsor? Only time will tell. Because in the end, a crown may grant power and dominion over a nation, but it will never bring peace to a restless heart.